it going, card fighters? I'm Gleaming Garmore, and today we're going to talk about the Mega Man collectible card game. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to do a Great Nature deck profile today for premium because I'm sure you guys saw Solemn's tier list where he said that every single format somebody tries to tell him that they've broken Great Nature. Well, it's my turn. It's my turn. I've broken Great Nature. I did it. For real though, let's talk about what makes this deck tick, how exactly you're meant to get through your early game without just, absolutely eating it. Because that's the most important issue that this deck faces, is Great Nature does not have very much you can do in the early game. So, you want to avoid early rush at all possibilities. So we play many cards that try to prevent us from dying to our opponent's rush turns. Let's talk about our ride up first. So we're going to talk about each of the grade 1s we play in this deck, and how only 2 of them are actually good on Vanguard skills, but sometimes you just have to take what you can get. First of all, you can ride your 2 of Diligent Assistant Bigbelly, who is a grade 3 searcher. Check the top 5 for a grade 3 card, add it to your hand. If you add a card, you discard a card. Then there's Expert Grader Nezutobi, who when hitting a Vanguard, just when hitting, draws you a card. And also on the rear guard, if you have a Bigbelly Vanguard and this card gets retired, you countercharge one. But then we're also playing Mikisaburo, Rolex, and Minoculous Tiger, whose abilities we'll talk about later because they are much more relevant as rear guards and guardians than they are as ride targets. It's just that you are very likely to ride one of these cards. Don't worry, you're playing a lot of copies of each of them. On to the grade 2 of your ride up. There's one that's okay and one that's great to ride. Your okay ride is Spool Mary. When Spool Mary is rode upon, you can call her to the rear guard. And when she's on the rear guard, if you have a Bigbelly Vanguard, you attack. She gives herself and that Vanguard 10,000 power. And then, at the end of the turn, she retires herself. Now, by gaining that 10k power, on any Excel marker, she hits the 20k power threshold for Bigbelly. And on an Excel 2 marker, she hits your highest success threshold, which is 25,000. Your main grade 2 ride, though, is Compass Lion. Compass Lion is a grade 2 with 13,000 power that says at the end phase, you must retire one of your rear guards. You must. And you combine that with the effect of your Honorary Assistant Mikisaburo on turn 2 to search out either your grade 3 Bigbelly ride, your Rhinos, your talented Rhinos for a combo we'll talk about later, you're probably all familiar with it, or a Heal Guardian. Now, you might be wondering, is Compass Lion the only thing we're doing to stop being rushed in the early game? No. We're going to talk about 2 major cards. First of all, there's Heal Guardians I was talking about, the ones that you're searching with your Mikisaburo on turn 2. Heal Guardians, every clan has one of these if you are just returning to the game after a long break. They are grade 3 heal triggers with 10,000 power and 15,000 shield. And they have a first ability that activates when they're placed on the Guardian Circle, which is, if this card is placed from hand, you can choose, and you have not ridden a grade 3 this fight, you can choose one of your Vanguards and give it 10,000 power until the end of the turn, or you can choose the attacking unit and it gets critical minus, or you choose one of your opponent's units and it gets critical -2 until end of that battle. It's much more important to take the +10 because it blocks more attacks, but sometimes you just need to block one big attack, so you will just take the crit -2. It's very important to remember that both of these things are text on these cards. The other big one is Earth Elemental Rolex. You might remember this card as a staple 4 of in the Nightmare Doll deck. It's specifically the WCC list that won multiple BRO premium events. And what this card does is it essentially perfect guards a grade 2 or less Vanguard. And it also doesn't cost a discard. You can just call Rolex, And instead of just being a 10k shield, it is a cannot be hit. It's that easy. Now, for the Bigbelly grade 3s we're playing, that's right, Bigbelly grade 3s plural. First of all, we're playing Fame's Professor Bigbelly, which you were probably expecting. This is the VR from VBT 11 that says, when your rearguard is retired by a card's ability during each battle or end phase, you can draw a card. And this includes opponent's abilities as well. So if you are up against, say, Tachikaze, and they go into Dogma, I believe his name is, and retire 2 of your rearguards, you can draw 2 cards. Also, in the event that you're going first, when this unit attacks, you can counterblast 1 to stand a rearguard with 20k or more power. If you have a grade 3 in your soul, you can stand all rearguards with 20k or more power instead. It's like Anger Blader with a condition. And then the other Bigbelly grade 3 we're playing is Amazing Professor Bigbelly. He has the Success ability for 20,000. If you're not familiar with Success, it is a keyword ability that says, when one of your rearguards reaches this power threshold, the unit with this ability becomes successful. And we'll get into what that does for Amazing Professor Bigbelly a little bit later. He also has a stride skill, but it's also an on-play skill. When this unit is placed, or when your unit strides, once per turn by the way, keep that in mind, you can call a card from your hand. That unit gains 4k power. At the end of the turn, you draw a card and retire that unit. And then he also has one more ability. At the end of the battle that this unit attacked, if this unit is successful, you can counterblast 1 to stand one of your rear guards and give it 4,000 power. Now, interestingly enough, it does not attach a retire to it, but that's okay. That's fine. Because it's essentially a mini Crayon Tiger, and you want to play more copies of Crayon Tiger if possible, especially if one of them can be attached to a stride fodder and a backup ride. Let's talk about the most important part of the Great Nature deck, which is your cards that retire things, because you need retires to actually gain any advantage in this deck. So we have 3 major main deck retire units. Compass Lion, who we've already discussed, can retire any rearguard. Spool Mary, also already discussed, retires herself. And Crayon Tiger. When Crayon Tiger attacks while boosted, you can counterblast 1 to restand one of your rearguards. It gets +4. At the end phase, you draw a card and retire that unit. It's important to note that if an ability says draw a card and retire that unit, you draw a card even if that unit is no longer on the field at end of turn. So it does not conflict at all if you use Bigbelly's stride skill and Crayon Tiger. You get to draw 2 cards. But Crayon Tiger is massive because it gets you that 5th, 6th, 7th attack in this deck, and then also draws a card and retires something. And we really need things like these. Otherwise, we're not going to gain any advantage, and we're not going to proc Bigbelly's skill at the end phase at all. Also, I'd like to talk about our Sentinel lineup. We are playing draw perfect guards, but they are not the only Sentinel we're playing. While we're playing 3 draw PGs, we're also playing 1 copy of Revision Scientist Delibelly, who's a very important card in the deck. When it's retired from either Rearguard Circle or Guardian Circle at Generation Break 1, if your Vanguard is Bigbelly, you can Soul Blast 1 to draw up to 1 card and countercharge. It says draw up to 1. One of the couple of cards in the deck that you can elect to not draw cards off of, even if you use their ability, so that if you notice that you're running low on cards, you can just not deck out. That's part of why this deck takes Excel 1 rather than Excel 2, is because you're already drawing a million cards, and you would rather have the additional 5k power to hit success numbers and get more advantage that way. Let's talk about all the regular strides of the deck. There are 5 strides that you're going to go into, some more than others, but they all have their uses, and it's important that you play all of them. First of all, Omniscience Dragon Keltimka. Keltimka has a success ability of 25,000. Once again, that means once a rear guard hits 25,000, Keltimka will become successful. And when Keltimka becomes successful, you can choose up to 4 cards in your drop zone and put them on the bottom of your deck in any order. If you chose 4 cards, you choose 1 rear guard, give it plus 4,000 power, draw a card, and retire that unit at the end phase. Then, there's Immortality Professor Viragia. Viragia also has a success ability of 25,000, and when this unit becomes successful, you choose up to 5 rear guards, and they all get continuous resist and auto at end of turn retire this unit. If you choose 3 or more units, you draw 1 card. Now, this is a really good first strike because you simply hit the success 25, or you simply make a board to attack your opponent, hit the success 25 with a Spool Mary, or perhaps a Crayon Tiger standing whatever's on your Excel marker, or perhaps even just a trigger. And then you retire every single unit you've called, and draw for each of them at the end phase, because you're putting Viragia back first, to then use the ability of Bigbelly. Now, one of your many finishers in this deck is Omniscience Dragon Belarl. Belarl is once per turn, Soul Blast 1, and flip a face down G unit face up. All of the units in your front row, all of the units, that includes Belarl, gain 4,000 power for each face up card in your G zone. They also gain auto, Vanguard or Rearguard, on hit, draw a card once per turn. All of the rear guards chosen for this effect retire at the end of the turn. Now, what retiring all of these rear guards does is make Bigbelly draw you a card for every card in your front row. Also, if you do this while your opponent is on, say, 3, then even if you don't kill them, you're going to draw a card or 2 on the way there. Now, there's also the only stride in the deck besides a certain very important one we'll talk about later, that even so much as requires a counterblast. Apex Science Dragon Managarmer Aurum is act once per turn, counterblast 1, turn a face down G unit face up. And then you perform, send the top card of your deck to the drop zone. If it is a normal unit, choose one of your units and give it plus 10,000 power. If it is a trigger unit, this unit gains 1 drive until end of turn. 4 times. So you send 4 cards from the top of your deck, and for each normal, you give 10k power. For each trigger, Managarmer gains a drive. The issue with the trigger gaining the drive is that you've milled all your triggers. You're not going to check anymore. But that's card draw, baby. It also has another ability, which makes it a very valuable flip target of when your Vanguard attacks, if this card is in your G zone face up, you can Soul Blast 1 to call a card from your hand. And I use that a lot in conjunction with Omniscience Dragon Tipkalam. Tipkalam says, when your card is put from your rearguard to your drop zone, or your deck to your drop zone, you can put it on the bottom of your deck instead, which is a nice way to prevent deck out. But it also says, when your rearguard attacks, Soul Blast 1 and flip a face down G unit face up. Then, that unit gains 5,000 power for each face up card in your G zone. At the end of the battle, retire that unit. So you can then put that unit on the bottom of your deck. This ability is also not once per turn, so if you have 3 rearguards, you can Soul Blast 3 and give them all power. This one, I used to think this card was very, very bad, but it definitely comes up. There are definitely like 5 damage scenarios where you would rather restand something with plus 20k than give the plus 8 that you were going to get from your Belarl because you didn't flip that many cards early in the game. That said, this deck does have an excellent Generation Break acceleration game because you can search your heal guard costs, and because one of the best G guards in the game is this clan's flipping G guard. So let's talk about those G guards actually. First of all, we've got Immortality Professor Sankalpa. Sankalpa says, when this unit is placed on guard circle, you can counterblast 1. Choose one of your rear guards and your Vanguard. Both of those, or choose one of your rear guards, both that unit and your Vanguard. Gain 4,000 power per open circle on your field. Also, if that rearguard reaches 20k power or greater, you can then draw a card. And now Sankalpa is really good. It costs a counterblast, but it is also one more way to draw cards in the middle of your opponent's battle phase to keep yourself from running out of resources. That's the thing about this deck, is it just doesn't run out of Guardians because it has a million ways to keep drawing cards in the middle of the battle phase. Then there's Immortality Professor Kundalini. Kundalini is one of my favorite G-Guards in the deck, even though it is rather hard to use. Because it can very easily be interrupted by your opponent if they have Battle Phase Retire. Essentially, you choose one of your rearguards, and it gains the ability, at the end of each turn, retire this unit and countercharge one. And then Kundalini gains 5k power, or 5k shield until the end of that battle. Now, here's something funny that you can do with this. If you are by any chance playing Stamp Sea Otter in your deck, Stamp Sea Otter has an ability that says it cannot be retired by card effects. If you choose Sea Otter with Kundalini, then you have an at end of each turn countercharge, and then you just don't retire it. Unfortunately, the ability is only placed on it until the end of that turn, but you just get a free countercharge, which is nice. Then there's the least valuable of the Great Nature G-Guards in Bigbelly, but a very valuable one in other Great Nature builds that we might profile later on. Omniscience Dragon Mirage. Soul Blast 1. When placed on guard circle, you can call 2 cards from your hand, up to 2 cards. Then you choose up to 4 rear guards. They gain resist, and if this unit is hit, it does not retire until the end of the turn. This one is used for shenanigans and Isabel decks mainly, but like it's here because sometimes you can go Mirage Kundalini if you really need to make a countercharge. Then there's Head of the Bastion Ardillo, another one of my favorite G-Guards. Honestly, a lot of my favorite G-Guards in the game are in this deck, specifically because of how they interact with Fame's Professor Bigbelly. Now, Ardillo says you can choose any number of your rearguards to retire, and then, if you have 3 or more open rearguard circles, you give Ardillo plus 10,000 shield. Now here's the thing. Each of those rearguards that you retire off of Ardillo, Bigbelly lets you draw a card for. So you can just go into your opponent's turn with a board that contains 3 rearguards, use Ardillo on their first attack, and draw. Now, the most important G-Guard to ever exist is Sheltered Air Spangled, which we play at a lot of copies in this deck because it's just that good. Spangled is a Generation Break 1 G-Guard that for 1 counterblast and flipping a G-Guard face up lets you choose any number of your grade 3 or less Guardians, and they get the following ability. When this unit is retired from the Guardian Circle, draw a card. Now just think about that for a second. You guard a fat attack, you call a Spangled, you replace those cards you dropped for the attack. You just get them back. At what point do you just run out of guard? That's a trick question, you don't! This deck is insane! Now, there is one final piece that I'm sure you've all realized that I've avoided talking about, because I wanted to save it for last. And that is a nice little cheese combo you can do with our friend. You know them. You love them. The Zeroth Dragon of Death Garden, Zoa. Zoa, if you are not familiar, is an ultimate stride, which means you can only stride it if you have 3 or more G units face up at the beginning of your stride step, and you discard a card with the same name as your Vanguard for the cost. When Zoa is placed, you can counterblast 2. Draw a card, choose a card from your hand, and call it. Its power becomes 99,999. It cannot be chosen by other cards' abilities. And if it hits your opponent's Vanguard, you win the game. Now, why is this so threatening? Why don't you just PG it? Because Great Nature has a little card called Talented Rhinos. Now, Talented Rhinos says success 20,000, which it will reach if its power is 99,999. And then if this unit is successful, it gains 4k power, which, heads up, it will not gain because the ability that makes its power quintet 9 is a continuous ability, so its power will be permanently locked there. But it gains 4k, and your opponent cannot call grade 0s for the battle that this unit attacks. Now, that's okay. We'll just play a grade 1 PG. Or will you? We have Minoculous Tiger here. Now, Minoculous Tiger says when this unit boosts a rear guard, Soul Blast 1 and mill the top card of your deck. If it's a normal unit, your opponent cannot call Sentinels. If it's a trigger unit, your opponent can only call triggers to that battle. So what happens if you mill a trigger unit in a battle where your opponent cannot call grade 0s? Well, the only cards they can call from their hand at that point are Heal Guardians, which are both trigger units and not grade 0s. And that's it. The only way out of the Zoa Rhinos is a lot of good G-Guards. And if your opponent simply does not have them, it doesn't matter if they're at 1 damage, 2 damage, 4 damage, you just kill them. You win. Now, this is one of the major things to play towards. I think it's really rad that this deck can do this, that this deck has an alternate win condition that isn't inflicting 6 damage. Because while you can very much just bully your opponent out of the game by inflicting a lot of damage on your Belural turns, this is another thing that you can do if they just happen to live that. And sometimes you can do this. So the thing is, sometimes you can do a lot of Great Nature's like kill turns through very large hands. And part of that is Rhinos stopping grade 0s. Rhinos is a very important card, and I don't... At this point, I kind of shudder to imagine Great Nature without playing Rhinos, because this card is just so good. And you can stand it with the Crayon Tiger. You have a million attacks they can't guard with grade 0s. You cannot stand it on the Zoa turn with Crayon Tiger because it cannot be chosen by abilities. But for these other two, like, just go for it. Kill, 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 die. Anyway, with all that put together, your deck list should look something like this. If you've got any questions for me, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you like this video, consider subscribing and supporting me with the links down in the description if you want me to keep making videos like this. I've been Gleaming Garmore, and I'll see you guys some other time.